Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and special guests, welcome to this session where we discuss surface transport and how we might use it better through new routes and technology. My name is Elisiv Elvinsdotter, and I'll do my best to guide you through this topic. Some of our speakers might use some other language than English, so I'll just remind you of the translation units and which channel you can tune into, you see on the screen next to the stage. Let me also remind you about your cell phones, to check them and make sure they are in silent mode so we don't have any disturbing phone calls during the session. As you all know, our world today is one of change, and transport and trade are no exceptions. Since the 1950s, international trade has grown rapidly. Trade patterns have shifted with a focus towards Asia and Africa, and it's projected to keep on growing. Also, the average trade distance has increased, putting pressure on all modes of transport. What we expect of transport has changed as well. We want it cheap but reliable, with a possibility of quick changes when we need them. At the moment, maritime transport is the main mode for long-distance freight, but to go by sea takes a long time. So surface routes by rail or trucks are a faster option, but then we need those new routes. To be able to keep up with the demand, train operators have opened lines between China and Europe, and others are looking at reopening the old Silk Road for trucks between Asia and Europe, especially in Central Asia. And this is a project promoted by the IRU, the International Road Union. So surface transport can definitely be a competitive alternative, but there are some problems to be solved, like how to connect one mode of transport with another, and how to get our information systems working together. In some countries, the infrastructure is poor, and there are huge delays at border crossings and inefficient customs procedures or laws that are not harmonized between countries. And, well, you know this very well, infrastructure investments are costly, they're long-term, we need to get them right, so perhaps we ought to better manage what we already have to solve these problems. And not forgetting the sustainability issue. So what can we do to get the CO2 emissions down when using trucks on long-haul routes? In this session, we'll dive into this subject together with a number of knowledgeable speakers from different areas and parts of the world. So let us welcome them all. Please welcome first a very special guest, the Minister of General Affairs and Good Governance in Morocco, Mr. Najib Boulif. Please come and sit anywhere where you like. And welcome also our other participants, Uwe Leuschner, Vice President of Business Development for DB Schenker Logistics in Europe, East and Central Asia region. Jean-Pierre Loubinou, Director General of the International Union of Railways. Jahak O, Vice President and Director of National Transport Strategy Planning at Korea Transport Institute. And Jean-Luc Di Paola Galloni, who is Vice President for Sustainable Development and External Affairs at Valeo. So, I will begin by talking to each of you individually, and then we'll move on to a panel discussion, and then we'll end it with opening up to questions from you in the audience. So, if we begin with you, Mr. Boulif, could you tell us a little bit about the situation in Morocco?
Merci. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very happy to be able to take part in this panel discussion because there have been a lot of developments, and it will be a veritable platform where there will be an exchange on the matter of transport. As you have said by way of introduction, there are lots of changes in the world, societies change, and traffic and transport develops. Given those changes, also societal changes, there is now a very important question. Do we have to bear with those developments, Or should we accompany and foster and steer those developments so that those developments are of a benefit to every citizen and that the society at large can benefit? In Africa, and I regret that, there is a certain degree of instability in North Africa as well as in sub-Saharan Africa. And this leads to the following situation. Even though we want to develop transport infrastructure, even though we want to foster trade for the whole of Africa, despite all those efforts, and even though we have 5 or 6% growth in Africa over the last couple of years, Africa is still a continent of risk. And this leads to the following situation. Stable countries, among them Morocco in North Africa, for instance, there are geo-strategic positions for Morocco, also in the Mediterranean area. We are only 14 kilometers away from Europe, but we are also an African country, an Arab country, a Muslim country. So we have a lot of aces up our sleeves. So at a regional level, we have a special position and a special responsibility for transport. But we are also a country which are at the crossroads for a whole region. And it would be nice to have this position in maritime traffic, but it would be nice to be a hub for air traffic in Africa as well. For rail freight traffic, for rail freight transport, we have the aim to foster developments for the whole of Africa. In the future, we want to develop networks like that for every means of transport. But there are, of course, problems as yet. Hence, investors are still reticent. And large-scale projects for Africa have problems to do with implementation. At a Moroccan level, to be brief, I can say that Morocco has developed its infrastructure a lot, among them for rail transport, but also land transport, and our ports have been developed. Over the last 5 years, 16 billion euros have been spent for a country without oil, for a country without natural resources. This is a huge sum, and we have spent that on transport. We have developed a fast railway system in Africa, our ports as well, and Morocco has now rank 16 as far as maritime connectivity is concerned in the world. And we are connected to 143 countries. We develop investments as well, and we will become the 10 most connected ports in the world. But as I said, we develop all means of transport, maritime, land and air transport, and we have become strong players in logistics as well. We have improved a lot. We have won 30 points in a World Bank score, and that shows that we are not just the second biggest investor in Africa in Africa, and huge sums of money have been spent. So the second biggest investor in infrastructure in Africa, Morocco, and that develops us into a leader, so we can take a leading position in the development of infrastructure and the development of trade.
I read up on, sorry, we'll wait a little bit for you. When I read about Morocco beforehand, I read about these huge investments in infrastructure that you've made, and you have one of the most highly developed infrastructures in Africa. And you have these master plans that you've drawn up for 2030, 2035. Do you think these plans that you have made are the key to be able to keep up with this development? Because many countries find it it difficult to spend that much money and then stick to the plans and...
Comme vous l'avez dit, le Maroc, en ce moment...
As you have already said, Morocco is a country which wants to do the following by 2025 to become an emerging country. And for that, we have set ourselves several aims. There are several challenges we have at a strategic level, as far as general strategy is concerned, in terms of infrastructure. We have tried to develop sectoral strategies for the years 2030, 2035, for freight traffic, but also for land traffic, for road traffic, for motorway traffic, and rail. Those strategies have been implemented so that for every one of those strategies, there is now a special management. Either there is an agency or a dedicated body, and they have to conclude agreements or contracts with the government. And there are very clear aims, very clear goals. By doing it in this way, we have started an industrial plan. The aim is the following. We want to focus on certain industries. The car industry, namely, and quite soon there will be further investment in Morocco. We develop air traffic as well. And we want to be one of the major exporting countries in Africa. We are the first country exporting cars in Africa. So those different industrial strategies have to do with our transport strategy as well. At an institutional level, there have been several reforms. We have developed an open sky policy. There has been liberalization for freight traffic, for the rail system, and also for land traffic. There have been tendering processes, contracts have been signed, and this makes it possible for us to make progress in different sectors. There is public investment, but also public-private partnerships for those projects, that is. At my ministry, and you said by way of introduction that I'm a Minister of General Affairs, but for 1.5 years I've been a Minister of Transport, in fact. But those PPPs, 3 billion euros have been and will be spent in 2015. So there have been quite a number of reforms which have been effected so that those projects can be a success.
Well, I'm sorry for my mistake about you being not the Minister of Transport. The Wikipedia page is not up to date, I can tell you. But if we look at Africa in general, it's a growing trade area, but African transport is costly. We have problems with bad infrastructure, bad vehicles, poor transport. What do you think is needed to facilitate more transport in Africa and with African trading partners?
Oui, effectivement.
Indeed, that is true. Indeed, lots of investors are reticent if there is no political stability. It's very important to foster democracy. It's important to foster stability. And quite a number of countries, Asian countries as well as European countries and emerging countries, do invest in Africa. As far as infrastructure is concerned, there are large-scale infrastructure projects to do with transport, but in some countries we do have problems, so it is difficult. It is difficult for investors to invest. Those investments may not be successful after all. In North Africa, we have signed quite a number of conventions and past conventions with other African countries, and His Highness is traveling around Africa at the moment. We will sign several conventions, especially as far as transport is concerned. What is important is stability, democracy, and in this way we will be able to develop infrastructure. As we have between 5 and 6% growth in Africa, you need to develop infrastructure at the same time. And you know that in the economic sphere, 1% investment in infrastructure is 1% growth of GDP. There is money, you could invest, but we would need profitable projects and viable projects and projects which would be a benefit to all countries, so sustainable projects, that is. There are promising projects, lots of them. However, we have to prioritize among the African countries. So first those who are better developed, and then spread it to the rest of Africa, countries which are stable and would be in a position to take a part in that project.
Mr. Belief, it sounds like it's quite a long road ahead to get African transport going smoothly. Perhaps it's easier with China. If I'll turn to you, Mr. Ivo Leuschner from DB Schenker. DB Schenker is Europe's biggest rail carrier. You have a global network. You also have lots of joint ventures with railways of United Arab Emirates, China Railways, Russian Railways. And together with Russian Railways, you now have opened block train transports between China and Europe. How has that process been?
Of course, we started the block train business in 2011. And it was, I would say, at first an adventure. Because that is a product in a logistic world which is only coming up. And you have to imagine we have to cross mountains, we have to cross long land plots without water, without bridges. We have to cross a lot of borders, and we have to bring together a lot of partners to present such a product. At first, in 2011, this product was pushed, I would say, by the clients producing in Asia. And these clients, especially in the electronic industry, ask us, because we relocated the production places from the east border in China into the Midland, if such a product can exist. And on the end of the day, we found a solution with partners by the China Railways, by Kazakhstan Railways, by the Russian Railways, by the Belarusian Railways, and on the end of the day also by the European Railways, by DB.
What would you say were the main problems that you needed to solve before you could start these transport chains going?
I wouldn't say main problems, I would say main challenges.
All right, main challenges then.
At first it was to bring together different partners, because we are crossing in railway different countries where are not at all the railway is liberalized or the markets are not liberalized. That means on the first of the beginning, one of the main question was to find a basic in law, in customs clearance procedures to bring or to produce such a block train. On the first of the beginning, we needed also more than 23 days for one race from Midland China into Europe, into Germany, into Duisburg. And this question was still and is still a question of optimization. Secondly, we had to find the equipment, because we are crossing different railway systems. 1520, 1485, different container systems and so on. And if you can imagine, if you are crossing mountains approximately 3,500 meters high, in wintertime there are temperatures of approximately minus 40 degrees. To find this equipment which secure the cargo inside is also still a question what we have.
So how have you managed so far? Would you say that the transport chain feels reliable now?
Sure, it is absolutely developing amazing. We have year by year just now a growth of approximately 50 up to 60% of the trains. We started with 15 trains in 2011, and the plan for 2015 are 400 trains westbound.
Wow, that's
and
a big
100
change.
trains eastbound.
That's a big change.
That is a challenge, and that's a big change, yes.
So what would you say, I mean, looking at what you mentioned with getting a train through so many different countries with technical, organizational, different electrical systems and so on, what were the key points for you to make it smooth?
I would say at first the key point is to have customers which have trust. Trust to such a solutions. That is very important. That means a communication between the customer for each problem and to find common solution, because the customer have to be happy about this product and have to be also ready to take this product as an alternative for the former solutions in air freight or also in ocean freight. Secondly, we had to found an alliance by the producers, especially the railway organizations. The railway organizations in China, in Kazakhstan, in Russia, in Belarus, but also to define who will be the trucking organization and who will be the operator on this way. And on the end of the day, we had to find out also good relationships to the officials in customs, and of course also in officials crossing this quite long distances via these countries, what is related with security and things of quality for the production at all.
What would you say still remains a challenge and something that you're wanting to, get better flow on?
We know today that the request for this land plot or rail solution via this Silk Road is larger as we can service it today. The question is especially that a lot of companies are more and more related to markets where the clients are asking for quick deliveries. And the advantages for this product are at all the delivery times. We are serving today mainland China, Duisburg or Hamburg in Europe, approximately from 13 up to 15 days. That is a good solution because that is more or less a door-to-door delivery. And also the air freight, which have to be prepared, the cargo have to be delivered to the airports, the handling on the airport have to be organized, and the customs clearance and the distribution to the final customers also takes time. We know it takes today also between 8 and 9 days. That means the delivery time is the largest advantage we have, and that is the main driver in a moment for the clients to ask for this product.
Thank you. And if we continue with the train, and we'll move over to you, Jean-Pierre Loubinou, from the International Union of Railways. We live in a very globalized economy today. The OECD sees a trend of increased mobility in all transport modes. How do you think we should meet this demand?
Well, indeed, we are in a globalized world, in a globalized economy, as this panel is demonstrating. And if you are talking of the OECD statistics, it's true that their forecast through 2050 is that the transportation needs for mobility of freight and passengers will probably be multiplied by 4, all modes together. This is a tremendous increase. And of course, this increase will not be totally parallel with what is happening today. There will be a shift of localization of markets, of corridors. North Atlantic routes will probably become more North Pacific routes. The internal, hopefully, African market will boost by 12 or 14 times. The internal South Asian markets will boost as well. And the trends between Europe and Asia will justify more and more corridors, as we just mentioned. So indeed, we have to anticipate and not wait for this demand to adjust our infrastructure accordingly. And in this adjustment, there is a possible choice. Whether we let all modes deal with it, whether we have a better coordinated approach. What we rather call a transportation mix, with each mode bringing its own added value in complement with the others. And I think this is probably the most significant trend we see in this 21st century is an intelligent complementarity with modes. I think the rail interland of the Tanger harbor is a very interesting demonstration here on the panel, but we have many other examples that we can say. So anticipating is the key because, as you rightly said in your introductory remarks, investing in transportation is a lot of money, but also a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And in our scale of time, 2050 is tomorrow.
So how do we make sure that we invest the right way? You're talking about better coordination. What exactly is it that we should aim for?
Well, no one has the key miracle solution, actually, and the solutions depend probably on the context, on the existing infrastructure in some places and some others. But I think there is something that every stakeholder, financial or political stakeholder, is now considering very deeply, is the qualities, the intersect qualities of each mode. And they are not alike. I'll talk about rail, of course, and we know very well that rail has a number of added values, which is capacity, which is safety, which is also sustainability, which is much more put in the forefront of decisions nowadays, and we probably will talk about this a lot in this ITF summit these days. But rail, at the same time, doesn't have the flexibility to reach the final customer, what is called the last mile, for which road is certainly very well placed. Rail as well will never, even if we multiply the corridors, be capable of carrying, I don't know, 10,000 TEUs containers on a ship. But together, they can actually be very complementary. And I will take an aviation image just to make sure that we are very open to other modes, is what was introduced in America in the 80s, is the hub and spoke. And rail can certainly be the backbone of a transportation mix with long distances and heavy trains and the proper logistics to articulate with the spokes and collection and distribution. And this will introduce the ideas and the key idea of thinking the size and the positioning of the hubs, whether they are stations for passengers or logistical hubs for freight, before we see a master plan of transportation rather than after.
If we look at this long train route, such as the New Silk Road or the Eurasian Land Bridge, you haven't quite decided what to call it yet, do you think it's a possibility in the future to create more of joint ventures between countries, creating like a big hub and investing in it together? Because it's a costly investment.
Well, totally. I'm totally convinced that this is not only in the future, this is in the present. We heard it. It's a beginning. It's working. The time between Asian markets and European markets and vice versa can be reduced. The objective is to probably get it down to 10 days in comparison with the 30 or 40 days of maritime shipping from Shanghai to Rotterdam, for instance. If you just take the east and west corridors, the trade every year between these markets is approximately $600 billion. The market share for rail is 1%. But the reduction of time is also a reduction of stocks. And we know well that stocks has an economical value. So if you take very added value merchandise, like cars, or like containers with high value products, the reduction of cost is of time and therefore of stock is there a key economic driver to justify new corridors, new joint ventures. And these corridors are happening. We have the Trans-Siberian corridors, there's 3 or 4 of them. We have the Silk Routes, which you said was IRU, but it's also for roads, but it's also a rail initiatives through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and the south of China. We have another corridor through Mongolia. And what is being done at the moment, at present, is a lot of investments to not only renovate the existing infrastructures inherited from the past, but also to build the missing links. Sometimes it's just 10 kilometers, 40 kilometers. And these missing links are connecting the existing railways into an international new web. And this is, for instance, the SPICE or the Silk Roads, which are becoming the Silk Railroads.
Yeah. So if we look at the regulatory changes, I mean, I mentioned the procedures between countries, you mentioned border crossings can take time and so on. What do you think is needed to be done to change the situation?
This drives to the key question of interoperability. And I'm laughing because UIC was created in 1922 with the idea of facilitating interoperability. And I think in 2 centuries we'll still be trying to facilitate interoperability. But you know, interoperability is not only the question of technical interoperability. You mentioned 1520 and 1435. You have different size of gauges, you have different types of signaling, you have different type of equipment and container gauges and so on. So this is something that can be actually improved. But it's also, probably most importantly, if not more important, the administrative interoperability. And rail has still a long way to go. Roads has done their job. There is the one bill consignment, which is international, not for rail. You can actually give all the precise examples of how many bill of consignments you have to make to cross a number of countries. So this is something which, with the help of OTIF, the help of CIT, and the help of the UN, through UNESCAP, UNECE, we are trying at high level in UIC to facilitate and to improve. It will take time. We know what to do, but we will do it.
It will take time. Are we talking 2 centuries more, or are we talking 5 years?
Well, if it's my time, it's probably a couple of years.
Let's hope you're right. Thank you. Now we'll move on to Jean-Luc Di Paola Galloni. You're an automotive supplier, Valeo, multinational automotive supplier, all supply chains and logistics, of course, really, really important to you. So what are the main challenges when it comes to logistics and to get a good supply transport going for you?
Thank you for the question. And yes, indeed, when you are a global player of our size, present in 30 countries worldwide, with a turnover almost 13 billion euros, and with 80,000 people working for us, we are, as I like to say,
Probably there is some kind of translation.
Oh, is there a problem? Is it the microphone? Oh, I thought.
Is this was working?
Ah, maybe that one is not connected to to them upstairs. So okay, then we know we need to share that microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure, logistics, it's very important. And as I like to say, we are the piece of ham or cheese in the sandwich. That is to say that we need to supply the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, whether truck or car passengers manufacturers, but we also collect the huge level of tiers 2, 3, and 4 below us. And so the logistics get really a level of complexity when you are at our level of responsibility in the supply chain. The first, I would say, important factor for our industry is the time delivery, the quality delivery, and then all what Jean-Pierre Loubinou was mentioning, new and more constraints about footprint and sustainability. First, if I start with the on time, there is really nothing such like the auto industry where, you know, some delays are calculating for us in terms of fine within hours. This is also why we have car manufacturers dealing with logistics inside of our plants. And this is absolutely amazing. I'd like to say, since we have the Honorable Minister of Morocco, when he quoted one major automotive group in Morocco, it created immediately an opening of 2 factories in his country. And we are actually very happy to supply locally this very major OEM. And we are customers of all the improvements of logistics of this country, because it is extremely important to ship not only our goods towards the factory of our clients that is just a few miles out of the Tangier, but also the final product outside of this country. So time delivery, very important. The quality, because we are in an industry where we don't accept more than just 3-5 defaults per million parts delivered. This has nothing to do with aviation, where my friends from Safran, when they are dealing with Airbus or Boeing, would say, well, you know, we might have to fix 50 problems for an air carrier. We are not accepted to have more than 1 single digit default per million part. So that is the most challenging level of quality in logistics, which means that we are very, very sensitive on the quality of transportation, which is a huge challenge when you're also trying, as everybody does, to introduce more and more intermodal solutions, because each time you shift transport mode, you need to make sure that your container is not damaged, that your parts will be delivered without any default. And then the sustainability and the footprint, indeed, is something extremely important. I have to say that I'm proud to belong, and being the head of sustainability of my group, to a company where logistics represent only 4% of our CO2 emissions overall for the group. That is to say that we have done amazing progress throughout the last decade in really being obsessed by the best cost and CO2 footprint efficiency when it comes to our logistics. And we have introduced as much as possible intermodal solutions. I would say that for a company like ours, they do represent, I would say, more and more the example of infracontinental examples. I can quote what we have done in Europe, where we have really mixed the last mile with trucks together with rail, and even using internal waterways when possible. We have done the same in North America, where we have absolutely improved, as some might know among the public, that Mexico is basically the biggest industrial footprint for all the North American market in automotive industry. And we have really welcomed very much all the improvements between Mexico and the US and Canada in terms of intermodal solutions. And as what it was, like if I go back 10 years, to supply the big regions of Michigan from our Mexican plants, the only way was the truck. And nowadays you have a continuous rail road from the peripheral area of Chicago going down to Laredo in Mexico that works very well, with a very good improvement also of the customs. Because, as you know, between the two countries, well, they check on both sides a lot of things, and also including the goods. So when you have a lot of volumes of parts flowing between Mexico and the US, this is something you need to solve. So now, in less than 4 days, we're able to do such intracontinental of thousands of miles. So this has been an amazing, amazing, really improvement. Overall, worldwide, we've been really able to reduce our TEU that Mr. Lubinou was quoting. That is to say that we have been, despite the growth of the group, we are a growing company, we have been able to optimize the flow. We are, each time as it is possible, we use all the, I would say, common approach. We do the milk run that the logisticians know well. We also try to set up platforms for all our suppliers. And this is a very good solution in terms of commonizing the different localization for our supply chain. And so I'd say that we, indeed, we are an eager customer to check what the professional of logistics and improvement, and I listen very carefully with our friend from Deutsche Bahn Schenker had to say, because even if at the moment most of our Eastern European and Russian operations are dealing to a local market, for sure there will be future flows between these European side towards China, which is also a very big automotive market where we operate.
But this need that you have, that everything have to be delivered on a specific time, and then we have these new routes opening up. So what do you need to be able to trust a new route? What are you looking at then?
Well, for sure, as I was saying, what when something comes up being new, our first check will be the reliability, and first issue on the reliability, the preservation of the quality. If we check that none of our parts is damaged in a container, with all the cautions that we have done in the old packages with air things or whatever sorts of packaging, well, this will be the first thing we will check. Obviously, the second one will be the price, because we always are, we are in a supply chain. Our margins are always in a tense area with our final customer, so we need to find solutions that are also cost efficient.
So you will really test these different routes. I mean, from China today, you tend to use air, don't you? Because you haven't really gotten into...
It depends. For the time being, on transcontinental, we use the maritime routes when we know that the commodity, the part we are shipping from both continents can wait the time, but as Mr. Lubinou was saying, what we call in our industry the throughput time, stock as a value. So we accept that for some low value parts, you can accept to have a throughput time before the delivery in the industry of, let's say, 3, 4, 5 weeks. But then, when we need to ramp up because there has been a delay, for example, to give a delivery to a final customer, we need to use premium freight, which costs a lot because we need to use, indeed, as you were mentioning, the air cargo freights. But this is really not the solution we like. And I'm telling you, the extra financial community, and this is valid for not just our industry, but for all industry, is very much checking how a big group and even a smaller group is resilient and is willing to improve its logistics capacity to reduce the CO2 footprint and to try to avoid the incidents, to try to avoid the so-called premium freight where you need to I would say, cope with a backlog, with a delay, and then you're using what is the most expensive and what is the less CO2 friendly footprint. So we are trying to avoid this.
Thank you. Last but definitely not least, Mr. Jahak Oh from Korea Transport Institute. You know a lot about the trade and transport in Eurasian countries, of course. You also live in a country that is cut off from surface transport because of North Korea. And I know Korea is very keen on developing a Eurasian surface transport link. Why is this so important to you?
I think Korea is the very export-driven economy. So for the moment, the trade from Korea is 90% of trade volume from Korea rely on shipping. So the Korean trade are very eagerly, seriously seeking alternative route other than the shipping, which is more competitive in terms of time and cost, also reliability as well, you see. So as you know, the Korean Peninsula is connected with the continent, but at the present, in the past 70 years, Korea is divided and disconnected from the continent. So we are seeking for the trade and the better transportation efficiency. We are very eager to have the Eurasian the transportation corridor improved, also competitive, I think. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to achieve with North Korea in the way?
I think it is a very difficult question. Actually it's not my business area, but I think it's that is the North Korean transportation the transportation cooperation with North Korea should be solved with the international effort, not two Koreans mainly. So I hope in the future, in the near future, it will be solved, or so we can use the Eurasian transportation the network.
Like I mentioned, you're very much an expert on Eurasian surface transports and so on. And I know you have a few important points, sort of describing what problems need to be solved and what challenges we have, what needs to be done.
I think it's most important thing is as I said, the Eurasian transportation corridor is very much underused, in my sense. Despite of the importance of the trade volume and also the transportation network as well. So the reason there are various reasons which we can solve or overcome. I mean, basically everybody say every report said. It can classify it into two types of the problems. One is the physical barrier. Another one is the non-physical barrier. But according to the various report studies which I have read, is most of them are emphasizing the importance of the non-physical operational barriers rather than the physical infrastructure itself, actually. So we have to start with the non-physical operational software.
And then you mean then you're talking about laws, regulations, and such things.
Or some customs procedures, the export, the import documents, border crossing procedures, etc., etc. I think, yeah. And also I think there is some the fundamental structural problem with the Eurasia transportation network. That is the imbalance between westbound, eastbound traffic volumes. So that that naturally come to the problem of the economic feasibility of the transportation, the network or transportation operation. I think that is very, very important. So I think that now there is the high hope to overcome such imbalance problems. That should be solved through the economic development, economic growth of the countries which are likely using connected with along the Eurasia transportation network. So for example, China is now the rising country, and also many of the Central Asian countries are also enjoying the high growth of economic development. So that is a hope, I think. So we have to have a more what is the transportation demand, which are inviting the more investment for the improvement of the transportation corridor. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Now all of you have spoken, and now I'd like to invite you into a small panel discussion where I will throw out a question and then just raise your hand if you want to speak. And then maybe also try to keep your answers not too long, because then we can get more questions in. I know there's a lot of political will to facilitate trade and transport across borders, but then when it comes down to the actual changes of rules and regulations, it's a lot of details, and this can be really hard. What do you see from your experience are like the main issues we must change? Mr. Leuchner?
We must develop. We have to be.
What?
We have to be creative. Yeah. And as we heard, yes, we have to look for intermodal solutions. We already have it. We started with a client in December last year with a Silk Road delivery into South America. We delivered by block train the components to Germany, to Duisburg, went it by truck to Frankfurt Airport, and flight it out to Sao Paulo, altogether 24 days. It was a request of the client, but it was creative, and we have to be...
Now I'm getting curious. In what way were you creative? What did you do to solve it?
The client asked us how you can deliver in 3 weeks our components to South Africa from our production area in China. And in the past, everybody had explained how we have to organize air freight. It is expensive. CO2 emission of footprint is large. And it was creative to find out a way to deliver the same, quicker, less CO2 dimension, and on the end of the day, not more expensive as it was by air freight. It was cheaper. Yeah. And that was a creative way. And I'm absolutely sure we will find such new products in the future on this Silk Road or however, land bridge, in the future more as we can imagine. I'm absolutely sure there will be built up hubs as we know it from the ocean freight. In the ocean freight we need ports, and we have ports. Yeah? In railway freight we need hubs to change the destinations and the distribution channels for different product flows. It will come on. And take an example, the Chinese government, together with the government in Kazakhstan, have just now an investment program, and we have already invested more than 2 billion in Moroccos. That is on a highland approximately 1,600 meters high, on a borderline between China and Kazakhstan. The program is for 4 billion. They will build up infrastructure. And that is also a result of this relationship between Asia and Europe, that there will be founded in industrial production clusters. And that it gives a lot of more challenges for the future, also for logistics and requests for logistics.
Jean-Pierre?
Yes, there is a lot to do, obviously, and I can only mention 2 projects that with our members at UIC we have developed and making it easier to cross borders, because the key issue there is crossing borders. One is technical, physical, and the other one is non. What is physical is what we call the automatic track gauge change system, so that you can adjust easily the bogies which facilitate actually the crossing of a border rather than to transfer the goods. And everyone knows very well that you can actually transfer containers, but when you come to bulk, you will not transfer coal or ore from a train to another train. That would be too costly and too long. So these are things that can be developed, that can exist. Another example, which is non-physical, which is administrative. You know that the world is divided historically in a number of administrations. And in terms of trade, there is the CIM on one side and the SMGS on the other side. And we have actually worked with, and together with OTIF as well, to have one common consignment bill, CIM, SMGS, compatible with the both systems. This is just a way forward. We can do much more in terms of customs, in terms of VAT, in terms of fiscal integration, in terms of the follow-up and the tracing of the merchandise. And the theme of this conference, ITF 2015, is Connected World. And I think there is probably one issue which will help us so much in the tracing, in the information of the customers, whatever happens, is the digitalization. And this is an open and tapped possibilities to ease the so-called paperwork, which will disappear in less than 10 years.
Mr. Boulif, would you like to add something when it comes to the regulations?
Oui, effectivement, je pense que l'essentiel.
What is very important is that you see it all in a global context. There are countries which have made a lot of progress already. There is a certain degree of homogeneity as far as rules are concerned. On the other hand, there are lots of countries where there is a lot of delay and backlog, and they have some catching up to do. What would be important is to succeed in having true connectivity in a perfect world where everything were interconnected. The international organizations should play a big role in that. And their most important work is to work on this kind of convergence so that we get closer together, that we achieve a similar level, so that there can be some true exchange. And something else, namely regional organizations, which should try to get a certain balance between the different blocks of connectivity, and we have to work on that. Hence, for a country like Morocco, this is very important. Morocco has made a lot of progress, is close to the European Union. We are not a member of the European Union, but we are partners of the EU and have a special role in that respect. So we have to see to it that we achieve convergence among countries and that they look towards the European Union. For emerging markets, for developing countries, of course, they have to make even more efforts. They should do more. They should start a reform process. We know that is not easy. And they have to be supported in that. And I think the international institutions could do that. And there are examples, for instance, for trucks and lorries. If this lorry, if this truck wants to go through Germany, certain conditions have to be met. And we have to come to a situation to succeed in that. We have to adapt, of course, but beforehand, spade work needs to be done. And this is true for all institutions involved in that sphere. So we have to support those countries which want to develop in this way so that they can meet those challenges. Politically and socially, there are big differences. And through democratic means, you can achieve something, but given differences in our countries in Africa, it is a problem. We have to do a lot more and seeing to it that all reach the same level so that we can make progress in this debate.
Very valid points, thank you. Mr. Di Paola Galloni, I know you're also acting chairman of AirTrack, which is the European Road Transport Research Advisory Council. What are your thoughts when it comes to these rules, regulations and laws?
Yeah, indeed, in the platform that needs to bring, I would say, the common roadmaps to the European Commission for a better transport, logistics and freight transport are indeed amongst our key priorities. What we have advised, what we are working together in a collaborative research with milestones, step by step on long term but also on short term, is indeed to facilitate what are the best, I would say, introduction of new way of logistics. And when I go back to my friends, particularly because it's a road transport on the trucks, I see the examples, the very flourishing example of platooning amongst trucks, particularly the cases that have been done in Scandinavia and namely in Sweden. Very much pushed technology by very distinguished truck Swedish companies that are big groups worldwide. It is indeed bringing new solutions with progressive levels of automation. And indeed, what we're also pushing is what we call the synchromodality, which is really the better synchronization between the long distance part of the trip in freight and then this famous last mile. Because wherever we are in the world, we are delivering goods in big or small or medium-sized urban areas, and this last mile is really extremely critical. And I'm just exiting from a first panel where we will discuss with José Viegas and World Economic Forum certain issues, and amongst those, the automation within the future of transportation, and the progressive automation will be key even in some logistic aspects within the last mile in urban area. If you have semi-automated parcours of lorries, when you can avoid certain trucks, when you can avoid certain big vehicles in the cities, everybody's happy. The citizen is happy, the mayors are happy, you reduce the traffic, you reduce the CO2 footprint, and you have to install a better adaptation of system of delivery, dealing with traffic management, with open data, with on-time delivery, with schedules of delivery. And this is indeed what we are all working on. I say that from the industry side, from the trucks, the suppliers, the digital ITS industry, we are quite ready. Automation is already progressively installed. I belong to a company that is already providing the self-automated parking that everybody knows with cars. But when you have such kind of automatization, it means that you can install pretty soon last mile automatization in the cities. What needs to be done, it is indeed a better harmonization and a better standardization. This is what we are working with all at a European level, with different Ministry of Transportation, together with the European Commission, and to make sure that these standards and these regulations are getting more and more harmonized.
Mr. O, when it comes to technical solutions, I know that you mentioned that it should be a priority to invest in software to help with border crossings. How
Yes.
many countries are sort of in the forefront of this development?
Of course, it's regarding the laws and the regulations. There might be the many effort in various directions actually, but using this opportunity, I like to emphasize the impacts or role of the technology, especially the information and the communication technology. As already mentioned, the digitalization.
The technology is really important.
Yes, very important because it's now is the especially when you come to the Central Asian countries, regions, it is not very transparent. You don't know what is going. Okay, so I think this is my guess, my assumption. I think it's if we try set up some kind of the real time, the open data platform.
So transparency is the key here.
Provide transparency. So if you investigate the transparent real-time data, you know exactly what is the bottlenecks, what is the problems, where it takes longer, something like this, in detail. So we can tackle problems more precisely, more effectively, I think. So using this opportunity, I like to mention a very important symposium, which is happening in September, 9 to 11 September this year in Seoul. The Korean government is hosting the Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM Symposium on Eurasia Transport and Logistics Network. I hope during this symposium, the Korean government proposing the kind of the key agenda, which is establish the real-time open data, the platform, which is very useful for the monitoring the movement of the freight.
Oh yeah, so big symposium about the open data, more transparency, and it will be held in Korea in September.
This kind of approach is already happening in the urban transport or in the regional transport, I think. So we can solve the regulation or behavioral problems by the technology. Suddenly, I think that is the idea.
So we can get a lot of help from technology. I saw you waving your hand, Mr. Lubinu. You
so
agree, I guess?
Is the future.
Just to react on one word that you just mentioned, which I think is a basic concept, is standardization. And you know, most of the difficulties we have is because we have to merge different old standards. And whatever we would do new should actually respond to international standards, which are shared and common to all stakeholders and all partners. And somehow this is, sorry to speak about this, but as an international organization, this is a little bit the message and the work of UIC to transform what is or was called our leaflets, used by most railways in the world, into international rail standards, which is for operation and maintenance, which could then become non-voluntary but recommended standards shared by everyone. And if actually we go along this line, we could save a lot of hassle in the years to come.
Would you like to add something, Mr. Leuschner? I'm sensing that you probably have a lot of smart technological solutions that you can tell us about.
Yet, of course, we are still looking what is developing on the market. And of course, we are also asking official crises, international organizations, governments, to support the processes, and not everybody is supporting it. It's really. On the end of the day, the client will define what he needs and what he will use. And that means, on example, this land bridge will only live and be developed if we will be competitive with arguments for the market. If not, if we will be too expensive or too difficult for information flows, nobody will use it in the future. It's 100% true. And we have also to look for the developments in the future, how the markets are changing. An example, we are delivering with our product, especially electronics and components for the car production between Asia and Europe in a moment. But it will be changed in some years because digitalization 4.0 will change the product flow in this world. It will mean less components on long distances. The 3D printer industry is coming on. And nobody would need to deliver for thousands of kilometers some components. It will be possible via internet. And to produce on a place where is a request, where is the order.
This almost sounds like you expect there to be less freight in the future.
It could be, but we are also sure that some other components, some other products will come on. The markets will be changed. And that is, of course, not only a question or a result for the logistic industry. That is a result for a lot of other service industries and also for the governments. Yeah? If everybody will use the internet to send the components for complementation a car, or nobody will cross in transit the countries. Yeah? Less money on the end of the day. If you're looking for our iPhones and Samsungs and with electronic devices, also today we haven't to change it every year. It's nice, yeah, looking a little bit different. But it will work for the next 20 years. There will be changed only the software and the apps, what we are using. But the device wouldn't be needed in the future, delivered from Asia to Europe or to the Americas, as we had it in the past. Because this hardware is existing and working. Yeah? And that will change a lot. And we have to monitor it, and together with the governments, with the international organizations, quite quick find solutions for crossing borders, customs clearance, electronic freight documentations, and so on. And what you had said, really, to open databases.
So how, I'm a little bit curious, when it comes to the IT solutions and open data and so on, surrounding freight, border crossings, how are you working around that in Morocco?
Juste avant de répondre pour le camarade.
Well, just a few words before I speak from Morocco. Indeed, it is true that new technologies are around, and it will certainly be the case that this will have a lot of influence on mobility in the future, and it will have a lot of influence on the different transport modes. Currently, we use the internet a lot, and already we see a situation where people can work at home. So they don't necessarily have to travel to their office in order to do a specific task. And just to mention e-commerce, for example, there will be electronic solutions for some parts. And you won't need 10 people walk into a supermarket. It will be the other way around. The supermarket will come to them. So a lot of things will change in mobility. But from a political point of view, there are huge contradictions. On the contrary, there are certain developed countries where, for example, there were agreements between the centralized government and the regions. And the regions wanted to develop, and a regional development was envisaged with regional planning, and then something changed and something developed in terms of transport in regions. But even in the city, the situation is such that we take a close look at the CO2 footprint, and there will be more developments, and mobility will be reduced and not enhanced, at least in urban areas. So what are we supposed to do? Should we offer a wider choice for the different operators so that they can continue developing their modes of transport? Or, and this is true for everybody, be it rail or air transport, whoever it is, everybody wants to develop their own mode of transport. And this brings us into a bit of a tight corner because we have to take a look at how the ideal solution can be found that is especially beneficial to citizens and suitable. When it comes to Morocco, we still have not reached 4.0, but we have introduced e-governance, and we use IT solutions. We also try to implement IT solutions in transport, and we try to use it to coordinate the different product flows. And we try to put it on a more general basis, and we wanted to cover surface transport and travel, passenger transport, freight transport, and we have a typical Moroccan example, and that is there are currently benefits or a bonus for companies that have advanced as much as possible in that area, and we're trying to put it on a more general basis for the entire country.
Thank you. I think it's high time for us to move over to all of you in the audience. There we have, could we get a microphone over to this gentleman? I think we'll take the blue one, which is not working with the translation anyway. And then if you could please stand up and state your name. Right there, Mario. And then if we have somebody else that'd like to follow, just raise your hand and there will come another microphone. I don't know which one of you were first here, but we will pass the microphone around. Miss, up here.
José San Martín. Hello.
Yep, sorry.
José San Martín from the Mexican Transport Institution. I have a couple of questions for anyone in the panel. First, if there exists any plans or projects to develop and introduce in an Euro-Asian route a double stack service, as we have in North America. And also, if you could elaborate, you had said some parts of it, but if you could elaborate a little more on the issues of reverse logistics and the resilience of supply chains. I also heard a little bit about that. And
I think we have to take this one by one. Could you please repeat your first question and hold the microphone close to your mouth, please?
To develop a double stack service in the Euro-Asian routes.
Anybody wants to comment on that?
It could be possible, yes. But the regulations in the different countries are not allowing it in a moment. But technically, it is possible, and it would be a challenge also to push down the prices for the cargo transportation. And we are calculating something like that. And I hope so that it is coming in approximately 3-5 years.
You had another question,
and second is,
we'll take two questions from you, and then we have others, so we'll have to...
If you could elaborate a little bit more about the issues of reverse logistics.
Microphone, please.
Reverse logistics, the supply chain resilience with the present ruptures that the supply chains are suffering around the world because of climate, political issues, and also comment about nearshoring versus offshoring.
Anybody wants to comment?
What I need to ask you is what you have in mind by what you call reverse logistics.
You just mentioned about the defaults you have to return. The theory about it's easier for shorter and closer markets to return products that default in the car industry, you know, the airbags, and they have to return the cars to be repaired, etc.
Okay.
Reverse.
Okay,
Reverse.
I see what you mean. Okay, when there is a recall, and then well, first of all, as I said, I belong to a group. You won't have an issue in my group, and I'm not disclosing any secrets, where thankfully we really try to avoid, and it's 8 years that I am in this group, we never had recalls that would need an implementation on reverse logistics in terms of thousands of default parts, because I told you, since I am in the group, when I arrived it was 10 defaults per 1 million parts product, and now we are almost around 3 or 4 or 5. So reverse logistics, it's not really something that we have. You need to, now I speak for other companies, it is much more related to a different system of logistics that is less industrial, but is much more related to the retailers of the auto world, as I might say. But it is very differently organized on the supply chain industrially. So yes, you have some optimization between car dealers, and then I think some OEMs you're thinking of, North American, I won't quote the poor big OEM who will have to face a huge recall, who is actually facing it. It is a different logistics that has nothing to do with what I was explaining, because for us the challenge, I would say, is a more positive one in how to, in the original supply chain, how you organize yourself. The only examples that would come close to, but it's not reverse, is just how to compulse different level of logistics and how to deal with complexity of a huge supply chain. This is something, as I said, we're monitoring in putting common platforms, and where we ask our thousands of suppliers, or hundreds of suppliers, and when it comes to a single part, maybe a few dozens of suppliers, to get integrated with us in logistics platforms.
I think now it's high time for you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Ölaking. I'm a freelance journalist specialized on logistics in Germany. I have a question coming from the title of this event here, Crossing Continents. Europe, in my opinion, is as well a continent. And if I regard it as a continent, then I miss one means of that you mentioned over there, how new routes and technology can improve surface transport. Don't you think that there has to be added a third one, which is the attitude of clients? We have heard so much of the dictatorship of clients, and we have seen the flexibility of clients as far as value is concerned, who says that you are transporting goods by ship when you think it could take time. I never understood why clients like you transport goods from China to Europe for 4 weeks or so, and then come to Rotterdam, and then all of a sudden they have to change, and it has to be as quick as possible on the transport carrier, which has now become one of the slowest transport means in Europe. The port of Rotterdam has imported 45% of means of transport to and from the port by inland navigation. Don't you think that we have to change, or at least to try to change the attitude of customers as well, and not only the new routes and technology as far as...
and how do you mean the attitude of customers should change?
Well, that is the problem, not my problem, that is the problem of the ports. And maybe Herr Leuschner knows some means. Well, the port of Rotterdam has found it, and it says, we only accept transports coming in or going out 45% by inland navigation. Now, Hamburg has not the possibilities because of its technologies. I would like to know what is so attractive on road transports compared to railway transports or inland navigation transport that everybody's jumping on.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so we need somebody to answer. Do you feel like saying something, Mr. Leuschner? You're smiling. So.
On the end of the day, the economical figures will give the decision. And also the administration in Rotterdam and the administration in Hamburg is focused by the budgets and by the economical targets they have. And they will decide if they have such a market with whom they will work. That's our world of liberalized markets. But on another hand side, and I think we have also to add it, to change the attitude of the clients, I don't know if it is possible. We are living in a global world, and we have to fulfill compliance conditions, and we have to look for the markets we can get. But what we are focusing in a moment is, on example, also for this continent cargo flows. Yeah? That China is very, very active. And our European view, if we are looking for Silk Road, on example, is every time a view with camels going on this nice region, Central Asia into China. The view of the Chinese government, of the Chinese companies, is absolutely a different one. They understand New Silk Way as a way, of course, into Europe via the land plot, but we understand it via near Middle East to go into Africa, and we understand it also to go via different ways via ocean into South America. But it's an absolutely different view, and they are pushing it with a lot of subventions. The government of China has founded a funding for developing marketing and infrastructural conditions in this view of Silk Road for 40 billion US. And that is working. And I'm sure it will also change some administrative thinking in some seaports in Europe.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, sir. We do have one more question, but we're running out of time, and unfortunately we have to vacate this room. But perhaps you can walk up to some of our participants and ask your question afterwards. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope you found this informative and interesting. Lunch is served in the hall outside, and if you want to both eat and listen at the same time, there's the ITF lunchtime session about the future of trade and transport. It shows some work that has been done at the OECD and ITF. And you're also very welcome to join the ITF stand for cafe and discussion. Now it features the World Conference on Transport Research Society on the role of research in transport policies. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a continued nice day here at ITF in Leipzig. I'd like to add one thing, and that is, unfortunately, we have to leave the room quite quickly. So feel free to have your conversations, but take them outside, because for technical reasons, they're going to change the setting in this room. Thank you, everyone.